The sun dipped low over Maplewood, casting long shadows that danced across the quiet streets. In her room, Sarah Jenkins sat at her desk, the dim light of her lamp illuminating the pages of her notebook. She was supposed to be studying, but her mind kept drifting back to the scene she had witnessed just a few hours earlier. Her heart raced as she recalled the argument between Mr. Roberts, their neighbor, and the mysterious man whose face was shrouded in darkness. From her window, Sarah had a clear view of the confrontation. She pulled the curtain aside, her pulse quickening as she strained to hear their heated words. Mr. Roberts, a well-respected attorney in town, stood on his porch, his face flushed with anger. "You can't just come here and threaten me," he shouted, his voice trembling with rage. The man, dressed in a dark hoodie, leaned in closer, his words barely audible but laced with menace. "You know what will happen if you don't keep your mouth shut." The icy grip of fear wrapped around Sarah's heart as she watched the exchange. She felt a chill run down her spine, a premonition that something terrible would unfold. The furtive glances exchanged between the men, the tension in the air. It all felt wrong. Her instincts screamed at her to call for help, to intervene. But her body remained frozen, paralyzed by dread. She could only watch as the confrontation escalated, her breath hitching in her throat. The next morning dawned gray and overcast, mirroring Sarah's mood as she walked to school with her best friend, Jessica. The weight of the previous day's events hung over her like a dark cloud. Jessica, ever observant, noticed the change in Sarah's demeanor. "Hey, what's up with you? You've been super quiet," she remarked, nudging Sarah playfully. Sarah forced a smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm just tired. Didn't sleep well," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. In truth, sleep had been elusive, her dreams haunted by the memory of Mr. Roberts and the chilling threat that had passed between him and the stranger. She felt a knot tighten in her stomach at the thought of revealing what she had witnessed. What if it put Jessica in danger, too? As they reached the school, Sarah's mind raced with thoughts of the conversation she hadn't had. "Jess, can we talk after class? There's something I need to tell you," she finally said, her voice quavering slightly. "Sure. Are you okay?" Jessica asked, concern etching lines on her forehead. "Yeah, just need to get it off my chest," Sarah replied, a lump forming in her throat. She wanted to confide in her friend, but the fear of repercussions held her back. What if the man found out? What if Mr. Roberts was involved in something bigger than she could imagine? Later that day, in the dim light of her bedroom, Sarah found herself staring out the window again, lost in thought. She recalled the screams she had heard the night before, a haunting echo that seemed to resonate through her very bones. With each passing moment, her resolve to remain silent eroded. But what could she say? How could she explain the fear that gnawed at her insides? Just then, a loud crash broke her reverie, pulling her back to the present. She peered through the glass, her heart racing anew. The same man she had seen arguing with Mr. Roberts was back, lurking near the attorney's house. Panic surged through her, and she instinctively ducked away from the window, her breath coming in shallow gasps. What was he doing there? Did he know she had seen him? "Sarah!" Jessica's voice came from downstairs, filled with concern. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Sarah called back, but her voice trembled, betraying her. She felt trapped, ensnared by her own fears. The walls of her room seemed to close in on her, suffocating her with the weight of her silence. She desperately wanted to tell Jessica everything, but the words were lodged in her throat, a bitter reminder of the danger that lurked just beyond her window. As the sun began to set, casting an eerie glow over Maplewood, Sarah felt the chill of fear settle deep within her. She knew she needed to make a choice, to speak out and risk everything, or to remain silent and live in terror of what might come next. The path before her was shrouded in shadows, each step more precarious than the last. The sun had barely risen over Maplewood, casting a pale light that struggled to penetrate the thick fog that clung to the streets. Sarah Jenkins peered through the curtains of her bedroom, her heart racing as she replayed the events of the previous night in her mind. The heated argument between Mr. Roberts and the mysterious man echoed in her ears, and she felt a chill creep down her spine. She wanted to bury the memory, but it haunted her, gnawing at her conscience like a persistent itch. As she stood there, she noticed the flashing red and blue lights outside her window, illuminating the street where she had witnessed the argument. Panic surged within her, and she instinctively pulled back from the window. "What if they find out I was there?" she whispered to herself, fear curling in her stomach. She knew she had seen something, but the thought of speaking up filled her with dread. Meanwhile, the scene outside unfolded with the chaotic energy of a crime scene. Several police cars had gathered outside Mr. Roberts' house, their sirens wailing, cutting through the morning stillness. Sarah's heart sank as she watched the uniformed officers cordoning off the area, their faces grim as they assessed the situation. She felt like a trapped bird, her freedom stifled by the weight of her silence. From her vantage point, Sarah could see detectives Mark Thompson and Linda Hayes stepping out of their vehicle, their expressions serious and focused. They began to question the few neighbors who had dared to step outside, but their inquiries were met with indifference. "I didn't see anything," an elderly man declared dismissively, adjusting his glasses as he turned his back on the scene. "Come on, folks. Someone must have seen or heard something," Mark implored, frustration evident in his voice. "A man is dead. We need your help." Linda nodded, scanning the crowd for any signs of cooperation. "We're not here to cause trouble. We just want to get to the bottom of this," she added, her tone softer but equally determined. In the midst of this, Sarah felt a wave of guilt wash over her. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, wishing she could scream that she had seen everything, but the fear of retribution kept her silent. She thought of the man she had seen, his face twisted in anger, the way he had threatened Mr. Roberts, and the chilling realization that she might hold the key to the truth. But the thought of danger made her heart race even faster. As the investigation continued outside, Sarah's mind spiraled into turmoil. She caught sight of Jessica, her best friend, walking down the street, and a spark of hope ignited within her. Maybe with Jessica by her side, she could muster the courage to speak out. But would she understand the gravity of what Sarah had witnessed? Would she push for Sarah to tell the truth, even if it meant putting them both at risk? Later that day, as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the neighborhood, Sarah met Jessica at their usual spot, a small park with benches that overlooked the playground. Jessica bounced over, her usual cheerfulness dimmed by the somber atmosphere that had settled over Maplewood. "Hey, Sarah, you okay?" she asked, concern etched on her face. "Yeah, just a rough day," Sarah replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Did you hear about Mr. Roberts?" Jessica nodded, her brow furrowing. "I heard some commotion earlier, but I didn't think much of it. What's going on?" Taking a deep breath, Sarah hesitated, her heart pounding. She wanted to tell Jessica everything, but the fear of what that would mean kept her tongue-tied. I don't really know," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah, you can tell me anything," Jessica urged, her hand gently squeezing Sarah's arm. "You've been acting weird since yesterday. Please, just talk to me." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she shook her head. "I can't, Jess. I just can't. What if it puts us in danger?" Jessica's expression hardened. "What do you mean? You're not making sense. If something happened, we need to figure it out together. You can't carry this alone." "Maybe it's better if I do," Sarah replied, her voice trembling. "I don't want to drag you into this mess." As they sat in silence, the weight of unspoken words hung heavy in the air. Sarah felt the darkness close in around her, the burden of her silence suffocating. The tension was palpable, and she could sense Jessica's frustration simmering just beneath the surface. In the distance, the sounds of the ongoing investigation faded into the background, but the fear that gripped Sarah's heart only intensified. She couldn't shake the image of Mr. Roberts, his face pale and lifeless, nor could she forget the man who had threatened him. The silence of Maplewood, once a comforting hum, now felt like a looming shadow, threatening to swallow her whole. as sunbeams filtered through the curtains of Sarah's room, illuminating the scattered papers and books that lay strewn across her desk. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring blankly at her phone, the weight of her secret pressing heavily in her chest. The events of the last few days replayed in her mind like a broken record, each moment sharper than the last. The image of Mr. Roberts arguing with the mysterious man, the screams that shattered the night, the dreadful realization of what she had witnessed. Each thought was a thorn digging deeper into her conscience. Jessica burst into the room without knocking, her vibrant energy contrasting with Sarah's stillness. "Hey, you okay?" she asked, concern etching her features. "Yeah, just thinking," Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes darting away from her friend. "You've been thinking for days now. What's going on with you?" Jessica pressed, stepping closer. "You're acting weird, Sarah. You can tell me. I'm your best friend." The urge to spill everything swelled within Sarah, but the fear that had gripped her since she witnessed the murder held her tongue. "It's just, a lot has happened. I don't want to talk about it right now. Not even about what happened next door." Jessica's voice was laced with curiosity, but there was an edge of frustration too. Sarah's heart raced. "I can't, Jess. You wouldn't understand." "Try me," Jessica insisted, her determination shining through. "You know I'm here for you, whatever it is. We can handle it together." Tears brimmed in Sarah's eyes as she struggled to maintain her composure. "I saw something terrible." She paused, swallowing hard. "But I can't say anything." "Not yet." Jessica's brow furrowed. "You have to tell me. You can't carry this alone. What if someone else is in danger because you stayed quiet?" I know, Sarah shouted, the frustration spilling over. "But what if the killer finds out? What if they come after me? Or you?" Her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands, overwhelmed by the enormity of her fear. Jessica took a deep breath, her voice softening. "I get it, but staying silent might put you in more danger. You need to be brave, Sarah. We can find a way to keep you safe." "I don't want to be brave," Sarah whispered, her voice muffled by her hands. "I just want this to go away." "That's not how it works," Jessica said firmly. "You need to face it. If you don't, it'll haunt you forever. Just think about it. What if that guy goes after someone else? What if it's someone we know?" The thought sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. She couldn't bear the idea of someone else getting hurt because of her silence. "You're right," she said, her voice shaking. "But I'm so scared, Jess." "Then let me help you. We can figure this out together," Jessica reassured her. "We can start by digging into who that man is. There has to be a way to find out more." Sarah looked up, a flicker of hope igniting within her. "You really think we can find something?" "Absolutely," Jessica replied, her eyes sparkling with determination. "I can research online, see if there are any news articles or anything about Mr. Roberts or that guy. We need to know what we're dealing with." "Okay," Sarah said hesitantly, still grappling with the fear that clung to her. "But promise me you'll be careful." "I promise," Jessica said, her heart racing at the thought of finally revealing her secret. That night, Sarah lay in bed, her mind racing with possibilities. Jessica's words echoed in her head, pushing through the fog of fear that had enveloped her. As sleep began to claim her, images of the murder danced in her mind, twisting and darkening into nightmares that jolted her awake. She gasped for breath, the panic clawing at her throat. The fear seeped into her daily life, tainting every interaction, every moment of quiet. She stared at the ceiling, feeling the shadows closing in. It was no longer just about her. It was about the danger lurking in Maplewood, a danger that she was now a part of. And as the night deepened, she knew she couldn't hide forever. Sarah sat on the worn leather couch in her father's cramped living room, her heart racing. The walls were adorned with faded photographs of her father in his police uniform, a badge of honor and a reminder of a life that felt like a distant memory. The scent of old coffee lingered in the air, mixing with the mustiness of the room. She felt a swirl of anxiety as she prepared to share her burden with him. "Can I get you something to drink?" her father, Jack Jenkins, asked, his brow furrowed with concern as he poured himself a cup of coffee. "No, Dad. I need to talk," Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack set the mug down and turned his full attention to her, the weight of his past experiences evident in the way he leaned forward. "What's going on, Sarah? You've been acting strange since that incident next door." Taking a deep breath, Sarah's mind raced. Concern etched on his face. "I was in my room, and I saw Mr. Roberts arguing with this man. It got really intense." Sarah hesitated, the images flashing vividly in her mind. "And then, the next night, I heard screams. I think someone was killed." Her father's expression hardened, and he leaned back, crossing his arms. "Sarah, if you saw something, you need to report it to the police. This isn't something you can just brush off." "I can't," she exclaimed, a mix of fear and frustration spilling over. "What if they come after me? What if they find out I saw everything?" Jack's face softened, and he leaned closer. "You're safe here, Sarah, but you need to trust me. I can help you. You have to tell me everything you know." Sarah looked down at her hands, her fingers trembling. "I don't know who the man was, but he seemed dangerous. And Mr. Roberts? He's an attorney, Dad. What if he's involved in something bigger?" Jack's eyes narrowed as he considered her words. "You need to trust your instincts. If you think something is wrong, it probably is. But I need more than just fragments. What else did you see?" "That's all I can remember," she replied, her voice breaking. "But there's something else. I feel like I'm being watched. Like someone knows I'm keeping a secret." Jack's gaze turned serious. "You can't let fear control you, Sarah. You're stronger than that. I can help you figure this out, but you have to be honest with me." As if on cue, the phone rang, breaking the tense atmosphere. Jack stood up to answer it, but the moment he picked up the receiver, an expression of disbelief crossed his face. "Detective Thompson, yes, I was just talking to my daughter about the Roberts case," he said, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "And you think it's connected to the corruption case?" Jack's expression darkened. He glanced at Sarah, his eyes filled with a mix of concern and realization. "I'll be there as soon as I can." When he hung up, he turned to Sarah. "They found more evidence linking Mr. Roberts to something serious. There's a chance you might be in danger if you stay quiet." Sarah felt the weight of his words. "What do we do now?" "We need to find out more about Mr. Roberts and this man you saw. You can't keep hiding from this. I know it's terrifying, but we need to face it head on," he said. "You're my daughter, Sarah. I'm not going to let anyone hurt you. We'll figure this out together." As Sarah wiped her tears, a small spark of hope ignited within her. She realized that perhaps she wasn't as alone in this fight as she had thought, but just as quickly, a wave of fear washed over her again. What if her father's past came back to haunt them? What if the very people he once fought against were now closing in on them? The unspoken tension hung in the air, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the precipice of something far more dangerous than either of them could imagine. Jessica paced nervously in her small bedroom, her fingers tapping against the desk as she replayed her findings in her mind. The glow of her laptop illuminated the room, casting shadows on the walls, but the darkness outside seemed to seep into her thoughts. She had uncovered something significant about the mysterious man Sarah had seen arguing with Mr. Roberts, and it gnawed at her like a persistent itch. "Sarah, you have to listen to me," Jessica said, her voice urgent as she walked into Sarah's room without knocking. "I found something about that guy. I think he's connected to some serious stuff in this town." "Sarah, it's dangerous." Jessica crossed her arms, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "I know it's dangerous, but this is bigger than us. You saw what happened, and if we don't do anything, who will? This guy is a local politician, and I think he might be involved in all that corruption people whisper about." Sarah's heart raced. The weight of silence pressed down on her as she recalled the argument she had witnessed. But what if he finds out? What if he comes after us? She felt the chill of fear creep up her spine, paralyzing her resolve. Then we need to be smart about it, Jessica insisted, her eyes shining with determination. We can go to the police. They need to know what we found. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about justice for Mr. Roberts. Justice? Sarah echoed, her voice trembling. What if they don't believe us? What if they're all in on it? Then we gather more evidence. We can't just sit here and do nothing, Jessica urged, her hand reaching out to clasp Sarah's. You have to trust me. We can do this together. Sarah hesitated, her heart heavy with the memories of the night she witnessed the brutal argument. I don't know, Jess. I'm so scared. Just then, Sarah's phone buzzed on her nightstand, interrupting their conversation. She picked it up, and her face paled as she read the message. A single sentence stared back at her. Stay silent, or you'll regret it. Who is it? Jessica asked, peering over Sarah's shoulder. It's an anonymous message. Sarah's voice quivered. They're warning me to keep quiet. Jessica's expression hardened, a mix of anger and concern. This is exactly what I was afraid of. We need to take this seriously. If they know you saw something, they might come after you. I can't do this, Sarah whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. I can't live in fear like this. Maybe it's better if I just forget what I saw. Forget, Jessica snapped, her voice rising. You can't just pretend it didn't happen. This isn't just about you anymore. What about Mr. Roberts and his family? They deserve to know the truth. Sarah felt the weight of her friend's words, but the internal battle raged on. But what if I put you in danger too? I can't bear the thought of something happening to you because of me. You won't put me in danger if we're smart about it, Jessica replied, her voice softer now. Sarah looked into Jessica's eyes, searching for reassurance. What if they don't believe us? What if they think we're just kids playing detective? I'll make them believe us, Jessica said firmly, her resolve unwavering. We have to try. Sarah, we owe it to Mr. Roberts and ourselves to fight for the truth. The phone buzzed again, vibrating against the wooden surface of the nightstand. This time, it was a voicemail. Sarah's heart raced as she pressed the play button, her breath hitching in her throat as she listened to a deep, distorted voice. You have no idea what you're getting into. Stay silent, or you'll regret it. Jessica's eyes widened in horror. We need to get out of here, now. Sarah swallowed hard, the reality of their situation sinking in. Okay, let's do it. Let's go to the police. The determination in her voice surprised even her. As they gathered their things, Sarah felt the weight of fear begin to lift, replaced by a flicker of courage. Maybe, just maybe, they could shine a light on the darkness enveloping Maplewood. As shadows lengthened outside, Sarah and Jessica huddled in the dimly lit living room of Jake's house. The walls were lined with posters of rock bands, and the faint smell of pizza lingered in the air. Jake was a trustworthy friend, someone who wouldn't ask questions and who had offered them refuge after the harrowing events of the day. As they sat on the couch, the weight of their decision pressed heavily upon them. I can't believe we're hiding out like this, Sarah whispered, her voice barely above a murmur. It feels so wrong. Jessica shot her a determined look. It's not wrong, Sarah. It's necessary. We can't just sit back and let this go on. Yeah, but what if they find us? What if... Sarah started, but Jessica interrupted her. They won't find us here, she insisted, trying to sound more confident than she felt. And we're not going to let them intimidate us. We need to know the truth. Just then, the screen of Jessica's phone lit up, and she instinctively grabbed it, her heart racing. It's a video, she said, excitement flooding her voice. Let's see what it is. As she pressed play, both girls leaned closer, their eyes fixed on the screen. The video revealed a darkened room, illuminated only by a single overhead light. A group of men sat around a table, their faces obscured by shadows. The unmistakable figure of the man who had haunted Sarah's dreams, the mysterious stranger, was among them. Tonight, we take care of the situation once and for all, the man said, his voice low and menacing. We can't let anyone expose us, especially not a little girl with a big mouth. Sarah swallowed hard, her stomach twisting in knots at the mention of herself. "They're talking about me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Jessica nodded, her eyes narrowing with determination. "We need to record this. This is evidence." As the video continued, the men discussed their plan to silence anyone who might threaten their operation. They mentioned Mr. Roberts, and Sarah's heart raced. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. The pieces were starting to fit together, and it was terrifying. "Did you see that?" Jessica said, pointing to the screen. "They're all connected. This goes way beyond just Mr. Roberts. They're involved in something huge." "Yeah, but what do we do with this information?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can't just walk into the police station and say, 'Hey, we have a video of a crime syndicate meeting.' They'll think we're crazy." "We have to show it to Mark and Linda," Jessica replied firmly. "They can help us. They're already investigating Roberts. This could be the break they need." Sarah hesitated. "What if we get caught? What if they find out we have this?" Jessica took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. "We can't live in fear, Sarah. We have to act. For Mr. Roberts, for his family. We owe it to him to speak up." Finally, with a deep sigh, Sarah nodded. "Okay, let's do it. But we need to be careful. We can't let them know we're onto them." Just as they began to discuss their plan, Jessica's phone buzzed again, vibrating on the coffee table between them. She picked it up, her face dropping as she read the message. "It's from that unknown number," she said, her voice shaking. "It says, 'Stay quiet, or you'll regret it.'" Panic washed over Sarah. "What are we going to do? This is getting too dangerous." "We can't back down now," Jessica said, her voice steady despite the fear etched on her face. "We have to confront this. We have to go to the police." As they sat in the tense silence, the reality of their situation settled in. They were caught in a web of danger, but the truth was worth fighting for. Together, they made a pact in that cramped living room. They would face the darkness, no matter the cost. Even as the shadows of fear loomed around them, they understood that silence was no longer an option. The time for action was now. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across Maplewood as Sarah and Jessica huddled in the dimly lit living room of Jessica's house. The air was thick with tension, and the weight of their decision loomed heavily over them. Jessica's laptop was open, displaying the various documents and articles she had gathered about Mr. Roberts and the mysterious man they had seen. "Sarah, we have to go to the detectives," Jessica urged, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is too big for us to handle alone. They need to know what we found." Sarah stared at the screen, her heart racing. "I don't know, Jess. What if the man sees us? What if he tries to hurt us? We're not safe," she replied, her voice trembling as she recalled the chilling phone call she had received just hours earlier. The threat still echoed in her mind. "Keep quiet. Or else." "But we can't just sit here and do nothing," Jessica insisted, frustration creeping into her tone. "What if this is our chance to help Mr. Roberts? He deserves justice just like everyone else. We have evidence that can connect the dots." Taking a deep breath, Sarah ran her fingers through her hair, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on her. "I want to help. I really do. But I'm scared. What if they don't believe us? What if they think we're just kids playing detective?" Jessica reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand on Sarah's. "They'll believe us because we have proof. And we're not just kids. We have valuable information. Look at what I found about that meeting. It could prove that Mr. Roberts was involved in something much larger than we thought." Sarah felt a flicker of hope. "What if we go to the police station first thing in the morning? That way, we can be sure it's safe." "Tomorrow might be too late," Jessica countered, her eyes wide with determination. "If they're trying to cover this up, they won't stop until they silence us. We need to go now." Just as Sarah was about to respond, her phone buzzed ominously on the table. The screen lit up with an unknown number, and her heart sank. "It's him," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jessica's grip tightened around Sarah's hand. "Don't answer it," You know it's a trap. But curiosity got the better of Sarah. With shaking hands, she picked up her phone and answered. "Hello?" "Sarah," a low voice drawled from the other end, sending chills down her spine. "You should really think about keeping your mouth shut. It's for your own good." Fear gripped her, and she felt Jessica's hand slip from hers as she recoiled. "Who is this?" Sarah managed to ask, trying to steady her voice. "You already know. Just remember, silence is golden. Don't make me come looking for you." The call ended abruptly, leaving Sarah staring blankly at her phone. "What did he say?" Jessica asked, her voice a mixture of concern and fear. "He knows we're looking into this," Sarah replied, her voice trembling. He threatened me." Jessica's expression hardened. "We can't let fear control us, Sarah. If we don't act, we'll just be sitting ducks. We have to go to the detectives, now." After a moment's hesitation, Sarah nodded, a surge of determination washing over her. "Okay, let's do it." Invigorating, yet laced with apprehension. The car ride was filled with a tense silence, both girls lost in their thoughts. The streets of Maplewood seemed eerily quiet, every shadow stretching into something sinister. "Do you think the detectives will actually take us seriously?" Sarah finally broke the silence. "They have to. We have information. And they're in the dark, just like we are. We might be their only lead," Jessica replied, her voice steady, but laced with an undercurrent of anxiety. As they approached the police station, the building loomed ahead like a fortress, its lights glowing faintly against the encroaching darkness. Sarah's heart raced as they parked and stepped out of the vehicle. "Remember, we stick together," Jessica said, her eyes scanning their surroundings. "We can't let fear win." With a deep breath, Sarah nodded, and together they walked toward the entrance, determination propelling them forward. They had come too far to turn back now, and the truth was waiting just inside those doors. The air in the small local shop was thick with tension as Sarah and Jessica crouched behind a shelf stacked with canned goods. The muffled sounds of the bustling street outside felt distant, almost surreal. Sarah's heartbeat thudded in her ears, drowning out the faint music playing from the store's radio. She could feel Jessica's presence next to her, tense and anxious, their eyes locked in silent understanding. "Do you think he saw us?" Jessica whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "I don't know," Sarah replied, biting her lip. I can't believe this is happening." They could hear footsteps approaching, and Sarah's stomach twisted with fear. She glanced at the entrance, her mind racing with thoughts of the man who had been stalking them, the man who had threatened her life, who was now hunting for them like prey. "What if he finds us?" she murmured, her voice trembling. "He won't. We're hidden," Jessica reassured her, though she too felt the weight of dread pressing down on her. "We just have to stay quiet." Moments felt like hours as they waited, listening intently for any sound that would indicate they were discovered. Suddenly, the bell above the door jangled, and Sarah's breath hitched in her throat. She strained to see through the gaps in the shelf, her heart racing as she caught a glimpse of a figure entering the store. It was him, the man they had seen in the shadows, the one linked to the murder of Mr. Roberts. "Sarah," Jessica hissed, her eyes wide with alarm. "What do we do?" "We need to call Mark and Linda," Sarah said, fumbling for her phone in her pocket. "They need to know we're in danger." "Shh, not now," Jessica scolded, her voice urgent as she shifted closer to Sarah. "What if he hears you?" Sarah nodded, her mind racing. They couldn't afford to be reckless. She watched as the man moved further into the store, glancing around, his expression menacing. "I can't believe we're stuck in here," she whispered, feeling the panic rise in her chest. "Just breathe," Jessica urged, her eyes darting around, searching for an exit. "We'll find a way out. We have to." As the man approached the aisle where they were hiding, Sarah's heart pounded louder than ever. She could see the glint of something metallic at his side, and a chill ran down her spine. "What if he's armed?" she breathed. "I don't know, but we can't let him find us," Jessica replied, her voice steady despite the fear etched on her face. The man paused, and for a moment, it seemed as though he could sense their presence. Sarah held her breath, praying he would move on. Just then, her phone buzzed in her pocket, the sound slicing through the silence like a knife. "Shh!" Jessica gasped, and Sarah quickly silenced the phone, her heart racing. "That was too close," Jessica murmured, her eyes wide with panic. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to," Sarah began. But before she could finish, the man turned sharply toward their hiding place, his eyes narrowing. "Hello?" he called out, his voice low and menacing. "I know you're in here. Come out, and we can talk." They exchanged frantic glances, and Sarah felt her stomach drop. "What do we do?" she whispered urgently. "Stay quiet," Jessica replied, shifting slightly to get a better view. "Maybe he'll leave." "Yeah, right," Sarah whispered back. "He's not going anywhere." Suddenly, Jessica's eyes lit up with a thought. "We need to distract him. Maybe we can get out while he's focused on something else." "How?" Sarah asked, her mind racing. "Just trust me," Jessica urged, inching toward the edge of their hiding spot. "When I say go, you run to the back of the store. I'll create a diversion." "Are you crazy?" Sarah replied, panic rising in her chest. "What if he sees you?" "Just do it," Jessica insisted, her voice firm. "We won't get another chance." With a deep breath, Sarah nodded, knowing they had no other options. "Okay," she said, determination flooding through her. "On 3, Jessica counted down, her voice steady. 1, 2, 3. Without thinking, Sarah bolted from their hiding spot, sprinting towards the back of the store. She could hear Jessica shout something to distract the man, but she didn't look back. Adrenaline surged through her veins as she reached the rear of the shop, heart pounding wildly in her chest. Just as she reached the door leading to the alley, she turned around, breathless, her eyes searching for Jessica. "Where are you?" she called out, panic creeping back in. "Right here," Jessica yelled, her voice echoing in the cramped space. She came barreling towards Sarah, and for a moment, relief washed over her. "Did you get away?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. "We have to go now," Jessica urged, pulling Sarah toward the exit. "We need to tell Mark and Linda everything." As they stumbled into the alley, Sarah felt a surge of hope mixed with fear. They had escaped, but the danger was far from over. "Let's hurry," Sarah said, glancing back toward the store, wondering if the man would follow them. But before they could take another step, Sarah felt a weight settle in her heart. "I have to tell them everything," she whispered, her resolve strengthening as they ran. "I can't keep living in fear." As fluorescent lights flickered above, casting a harsh glow over the small convenience store where Sarah and Jessica had taken refuge. The air was thick with tension, and the faint sound of the bell above the door chimed, signaling the entry of another customer. Sarah's heart raced as she crouched behind a shelf stocked with snacks, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She glanced at Jessica, whose eyes mirrored her own fear, wide and alert. "What are we going to do?" Jessica whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "He's looking for us, and we're trapped here." "Just be quiet," Sarah hissed, pressing her back against the cold metal shelf. "We can't let him find us." Outside, the murmur of voices drifted in, and they could hear footsteps approaching. Sarah strained to listen, her heart pounding in her ears. The door swung open again, and a tall figure stepped inside. It was the man they had seen before, the mysterious figure who had been lurking in the shadows of their lives. Dressed in a dark coat, he scanned the store with an intensity that made Sarah's stomach churn. "There's no one here," the man muttered, almost to himself, his voice low and menacing. "I know they came this way." Sarah and Jessica exchanged terrified glances. They had to stay hidden. There was no other option. Sarah's mind raced, recalling the last moments before they fled the street. She could feel the weight of the secret she was about to share with the detectives pressing down on her. The truth was coming, but it felt like it might die here, in this store, with her. Mark and Linda should be here any minute, Sarah whispered, trying to sound more confident than she felt. We just need to hold on. Look, Jessica pointed subtly to the front of the store. Mark and Linda were just outside, their police badges glinting as they approached. Relief surged through Sarah's veins, but it was quickly replaced by fear as she realized the man inside would soon notice the detectives. Get ready, Sarah hissed. We have to make a run for it when they come in. The man turned sharply, his eyes narrowing as he caught sight of the detectives through the glass door. Damn it, he muttered, clenching his fists. They're not getting away this time. Just then, the door swung open, and Mark stepped inside, followed closely by Linda. Sarah! Jessica! He called out, his voice authoritative yet laced with concern. Where are you? Over here, Jessica shouted, her voice breaking the silence. The girls emerged from their hiding spot, relief flooding them as they rushed towards the officers. But before they could reach safety, the man lunged forward, blocking their path. You're not going anywhere, he growled, his tone menacing. You've seen too much already. Step aside, Mark ordered, his voice steady but firm. He moved to shield the girls, his hand inching towards his holster. This is your last chance to back off. The man smirked, a cruel twist of his lips. You think you can intimidate me? I own this town. You're nothing but a couple of frightened girls. Maybe so, Linda countered, stepping forward with confidence. But we have the law on our side. You're not going to get away with this. The man scoffed, glancing back and forth between the two officers and the girls. You have no idea what you're dealing with. I can make this all go away. Before Sarah could process his words, she noticed Mark's hand moving swiftly to his radio. Back up, he yelled into the device. We need backup at the convenience store on Maple and Main. Suspect in custody. The man's face twisted with rage. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, he turned and bolted for the exit. You'll regret this, he screamed as he pushed past the door, slamming it behind him. Go! Go! Mark shouted, urging Sarah and Jessica to follow him outside. The girls sprinted after him, their hearts pounding as they reached the entrance. But as they stepped outside, they saw the man speeding away in a dark sedan, tires screeching against the asphalt. Did you get a good look? Linda asked urgently, her eyes scanning the street. Yeah, he was... Sarah started, but she felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her breathless. Focus, Sarah, Mark urged, his voice cutting through her fog. What did you see? He was talking to someone, she stammered, trying to piece together the fragments of her memory. At Mr. Roberts' house. I think he's connected to the murder. Linda's eyes widened. This just got bigger than we thought. We need to move fast before he disappears. As Mark and Linda discussed their next steps, Sarah felt a mix of fear and determination swelling within her. She had come too far to turn back now. The truth was finally within reach, but she knew that the danger was far from over. As the evening shadows stretched across the small town of Maplewood, Sarah felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The revelation of her father's hidden past weighed heavily on her mind, a burden she could no longer ignore. With a deep breath, she braced herself for the confrontation that awaited her at home. She could hear the distant sounds of sirens, a reminder that the turmoil in her life was mirrored by the chaos surrounding her. The walls of their modest house felt like they were closing in on her as she stepped inside, the air thick with unspoken words. "Dad?" she called, her voice trembling slightly. There was no answer, just the muffled sound of the television in the living room. Sarah walked slowly toward the noise, her heart racing with each step. When she reached the doorway, she found her father, James Jenkins, seated in his worn-out armchair, eyes glued to the screen. The flickering light cast shadows across his face, highlighting the worry lines that had deepened over the years. "Sarah," he said, finally glancing up. "You're back early. How was school?" "It was fine," she replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Can we talk?" James frowned, sensing the gravity in her tone. "Sure. What's on your mind?" Sarah took a deep breath, her resolve wavering. "I found out something about Mr. Roberts, about the night he was killed. I think I know who the mysterious man is." James's expression shifted, a flicker of concern crossing his features. "What do you mean? Who?" "It's not just that." Her voice was steadying. "It's about you, Dad. I found out you were an informant. You knew things, dangerous things." His face paled, and he leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "Sarah, it's not what you think. I was trying to protect you, protect our family." "Protect us," she exclaimed, her voice rising in frustration. "By keeping secrets, by being involved in this mess? Don't you see how dangerous this is?" "Listen to me," he said urgently, standing up. "I did what I had to do. There were things happening in this town that you couldn't understand. I thought it was over." "Over?" Sarah scoffed, tears brimming in her eyes. "It's not over. The man who was after Mr. Roberts is after us now. I've seen him, and I know he's connected to you." James took a step back, his face a mask of disbelief. "What? Who is he?" "It's someone involved in politics," she said, frustration boiling over. "Someone you probably thought you could trust, but he's a killer, and he's been covering his tracks for too long." "Who?" James demanded, his voice low and intense. "His name is Robert Sinclair," Sarah said, the name falling from her lips like a stone. I didn't want to believe it, but if he's involved, then you're right in the middle of this mess. As those words hung in the air, the tension in the room thickened. James ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. "How do you know this?" "I've been investigating, Dad. I couldn't just sit back and pretend everything was fine anymore. Jessica and I—" "Jessica?" he interrupted, concern etched into his brow. "You shouldn't be involving her in this. It's too dangerous." "She's already involved," Sarah insisted, frustration boiling over. "We're in this together. We've seen things, Dad. We're not just kids anymore." James stared at her, his heart aching for his daughter. "I never wanted this for you. I thought I could keep you safe." Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from outside, followed by the unmistakable sound of sirens growing louder. Sarah's heart raced. "What was that?" James rushed to the window, pulling aside the curtain. "Oh no, it can't be." His voice trailed off, and Sarah moved to his side, peering out into the darkening street. In the distance, flames flickered ominously from a nearby building, illuminating the night sky. People gathered, their faces painted with shock and fear. "What happened?" Sarah whispered, dread creeping into her voice. "It looks like a fire," he muttered, his mind racing. "But it could be a distraction. We need to get out of here." "Why?" Sarah asked, her pulse quickening. "What do you know?" "Because if Sinclair is behind this, he's trying to cover his tracks," James said, urgency lacing his words. "We need to leave now, before it's too late." As they hurried toward the back door, Sarah felt a surge of determination. "I can't keep running, Dad. I have to confront this. I have to end this cycle of fear." "Then we'll do it together," he said, turning to face her, pride mingled with worry in his eyes. "But we need to be smart about it. We can't let fear dictate our lives anymore." Just as they stepped outside, the sound of distant screams broke the tense silence, signaling that the night was far from over and that their fight for justice was just beginning.